Health plans can sell insurance across state lines today. The issue is that they have to get registered and licensed in the states that they're selling insurance in. And that means that they are then subject to the regulations of the insurance commissioners and the state that they're selling insurance in. What I think people have proposed when they talk about selling insurance across state lines is the idea that they wouldn't have to get regulated in every state that they sell insurance in, but could simply be regulated in one and then sell insurance across the country.
States could decide, look, we're just going to let our residents purchase insurance licensed by other states, and that'll be enforceable. Those contracts will be enforceable here in this state. So what else can give consumers that freedom? Well, Congress could pass a law. Congress has the power to make commerce regular between the states, and that means tearing down barriers to trade between the states, which is what these licensing laws are. So Congress could pass a law that says no state shall prohibit its residents from purchasing insurance licensed by another state, and that would be it. After you repeal Obamacare, of course, you need to repeal that in order to make this idea work. But then Congress could do that, and consumers would have the freedom to purchase health insurance license from any state in the country, just as they could produce products manufactured in any state in this country.
Health plans have been able to sell insurance across state lines forever. The reason that they don't, for the most part, is because it's actually very difficult to set up a health plan in a state. You have to have contracts with hospitals and doctors. You have to have some presence in that state. There's a really high barrier to entry that has nothing to do with the regulatory restrictions, really. It has to do with how complicated it is to set up health insurance.
Now, opponents of the idea also claim that, well, it won't work because an out-of-state insurance company is not going to be able to contract with doctors in that state that see patients. And I don't know why that should be so, because we have people contracting with other producers contracting with each other across state lines all the time. We have these wonderful things called telephones. We have the internet. We even have networks of doctors that non-insurance companies already create, that insurance companies could just come in and use, negotiate their own rates with those doctors. But look, this is a cost of doing business, and if that cost is too high, then people won't use the option. The main reason to let people purchase insurance licensed by a state other than their own is that it will drive down premiums and it will improve the quality of coverage. Now, how will it drive down premiums? Well, lots of states require people to purchase lots of types of insurance that they don't want, and that increases their coverage or their premiums. If you have to purchase coverage for alcoholism treatment, even if you're a teetotaler, that will drive up your premiums, and it's not going to help you because you're never going to use alcoholism treatment, so you don't need coverage for that. And if you give people the freedom to purchase insurance licensed by a state that does not require that, then they'll be able to purchase more affordable insurance.
The idea of selling insurance across state lines being a race to the bottom really means that insurance plans, health plans, like any business, are going to look to be licensed, to be registered in a state that has the least regulatory requirements. Let's say states like Delaware that generally have, very little regulatory controls. And then they could go and sell their health plans in other states, let's say California, New York, Michigan, that tend to have more regulatory controls. And the health plans in those states would not be as tightly controlled, would not have to meet things like the sufficiency of reserves requirements to make sure they were financially stable, wouldn't have to provide the kinds of benefits or treat citizens in ways that the states think that they should. So they'd be exempt from all those state laws. We have seen health plans in the past go bankrupt, and it has left consumers with absolutely no coverage in the middle of a year when they expected coverage. That is a huge problem for consumers and for people who are ill and who might need their health coverage.
So people like to criticize the idea of letting consumers purchase insurance across state lines, insurance licensed by another state, on the grounds that if you allow people to purchase insurance licensed by a state other than their own, then insurance commissioners or legislatures in those in say one state will say, you know what, we want to collect all sorts of premium revenue by just attracting all this business to our state by totally gutting our consumer protections, so that we won't have any rules about health insurance, and then there won't be any rules and critics then complain that there won't be any protections for consumers when insurance companies don't keep their promises, when they deny coverage or when they go out of business, because there won't be any financial protections. And this is really just a red herring or a boogeyman. This is not something that would actually happen in the real world. If you really want to know what a race to the bottom is, have a look at Obamacare's exchanges. That's where you have monopolistic regulation, you have over-regulation, and the exchanges are collapsing. Premiums have more than doubled in Obamacare's exchanges over 4 years.
It's really important to understand that the free market exists in health insurance today, and consumers do have choices of health plans in most places. It isn't the case in every community in the country, but that's often because these are rural communities. There isn't enough market presence of health plans in those communities to really invest the capital that's needed to develop a health plan in those areas. Again, it doesn't really have to do with a regulatory barrier. It's kind of interesting that the people who are advocating for this kind of legislation actually aren't the health plans. This is not the issue that they feel is the problem with getting access. They're much more interested in financial stabilization, risk corridors, and some of the other issues that are being discussed around the Affordable Care Act than they are in this issue about changing how states regulate health plans.
Insurance companies hate this idea. They hate the idea of consumers having more freedom to choose someone other than them. They hate the idea of other insurance companies coming to compete for their customer base. They don't want, insurance companies like big businesses everywhere, they don't want freedom and free markets. They don't want market competition. They want protection from competition. They want government subsidies. They do not want their position threatened by market competition, precisely because market competition poses a threat to their profit margins and their executive salaries and so forth.